And the previous session nicely, and our panelists are going to respond to some of the questions that were raised in the previous session. I'm Ceren Ünal from Internet Society European Regional Bureau. I'm going to be co-moderating this session together with Ana Jovanović, one of our SEEDIG Youth School Fellows. And we have a distinguished lineup of speakers. We have Olivier from the European Commission, Head of Unit Next Generation Internet from DG Connect. We have Penninckx, Head of Information Society Department at the Council of Europe. We have Jovan Kurbalija. Unfortunately, he couldn't be here in person, but he's joining us remotely, who is the Executive Director and co-lead of the UN Secretary General's high-level panel on digital cooperation. Can we see Jovan on the screen? Oh, hi, Jovan. Yeah.
Hi.
Just checking. Sorry.
Good.
Discussion with short introductions, setting the scene on first how to define trust, or online trust, or digital trust, and what is the current state of trust in digital technologies or lack thereof, and the main challenges and best practices for building trust online, of course, to be touched upon in detail in further discussions. Patrick, would you like to go first?
I can go first. I will have different tools in my hand because I'll have to change the slides of my short PowerPoint. First of all, I would like the technicians to dim the lights, because if we're speaking about trust, which is a rather intimate concept, I would say, we should really be sitting in a more cozy atmosphere, I guess. Just as a prelude, I would like to say that I use cookies to improve your experience with my presentation and to show you personalized advertising. You can read my privacy policy and cookie policy, obviously, and of course you're all okay with that, right? Yes? Okay. So then I can continue, because otherwise you would have to leave the room, obviously, as we do with our internet applications. First of all, I would like to comment on something that's been said before, that human rights should apply online as they apply offline. I'm worried with that, quite honestly, because if you look at how your human rights are applied offline today in Europe, I'm rather worried. So let's try to apply our human rights online better than what we do offline. Trust is a very intimate concept. The truster, that's all of us, is willing to rely on the actions of another party, the trustee, and the situation is directed to the future. The truster thus abandons control over the actions performed by the trustee. As a consequence, the truster is uncertain about the outcome of the other's actions. They can only develop and evaluate expectations. So this may involve failure and harm. I would like to respond to some of the questions that were raised before as well with regards to levels of trust. And I will start with a few slides. I hope this works. Girls, if a guy remembers your birthday, knows what you enjoy, saves your pictures, understands your family and friends, this guy is not your man. This guy is Mark Zuckerberg. Of course, last week, Mark, as we colloquially call him, organized a major developers conference of his team back in San Jose, in which he stated, privacy is the future. Of course, we should remember that his developers conference took place 1 year after last year's, which basically was just in the aftermath of the Cambridge Analytica scandals. So I think it's important that we when we speak about trust, especially with current day developments, that we know what we're talking about. Trust is basically very much a social relations concept. Assured reliance on the character, ability, strength, or truth of someone or something. A belief that someone is good and honest and will not harm you. Trust makes people confidently rely on the integrity or ability of people and organizations. So we're speaking about integrity, sincerity, reliability, consistency, commitment, competence. These are quite a number of very diverse and different challenges that we will have to face. And that the ones that the trustors and the trustees that commit with one another, especially when this is not an interpersonal relationship, but a relationship between, for example, a technical company or a service provider, that means quite a bit of confidence. And maybe we should be using the word confidence rather than trust in what we're saying. Especially when we're at an age when machines, artificial intelligence, are getting more and more into the intimacy of our lives. This is just a picture of machines that can now allegedly identify anger, fear, disgust, sadness. Emotion detection has grown from a research project into a 20 billion industry. If we connect that also to the work that is currently happening on facial detection and facial recognition, on which, by the way, in order to answer to Liliana's question earlier on, we, as Council of Europe in the privacy sector, one of the key issues that we will be looking into directly is the whole question of facial recognition and privacy, because this is one of the extremely important developments in the digital industry. Facial recognition, we know what China is already investing into this, and imagine the impact on the issues that concern us. Privacy, private life. How much of private life do we have left? We probably all are staying in hotels, are using public transport or private transport in which video cameras are installed so that can follow at all moment in time our movements. We use mobile phones, especially when you're sitting in this room and watching your computers and your laptops and your mobile devices. We're constantly open to scrutiny. If you combine that with facial recognition tools, emotion recognition tools, we're talking about a very intimate relationship. And trust in an intimate relationship, there is a saying in Dutch. I know not many people in this room will speak Dutch, and I will translate it for you in English. Trust comes in by foot and leaves on horseback. That's a little bit how we should be wary about the use of trust. Now, previously, I'm sorry, I'm a bit struggling with the remote. Okay. Yeah, it works. Previously, there was a question: what is the level of trust? What should we see as trust? I think rather than speaking about trust, we could first say what are the risks that are implied with the developments of the digital industry. The rights to my private and family life, the rights to my freedom of expression, the right to participate in democratic processes such as elections, free from undue influences. Okay. Okay. So rather than speaking just about trust, I would speak about informed trust. In the aftermath of what happened Sunday, and also what happened before with regards to the aviation industry, of course, the comparison with the aviation industry is a bit unfortunate at this moment in time. But why do we trust aviation in general? That is because of 4 elements: effectiveness, competence, accountability, and transparency. Effectiveness is to which extent is the service that we're asking, is it provided? Are there metrics? Are there sound methods? Are there quality labels? How do we measure fairness, for example? Competence, why do we entrust our lives to pilots? Accreditation of designers, of pilots, obviously. Then the question obviously comes into the picture of who should be accrediting, because we've been speaking about replumbing, in a way, the internet. We've been speaking about privacy by design. We've been speaking about security by design. But that means that we have to reshuffle the internet and how it is organized. Because until now, maybe private companies have ensured that there is a level of accountability, but to which extent is that sufficient to today's questions with regards to privacy, with regards to effectiveness, with regards to security? So that basically means a replumbing of the whole system. Sorry to use this industrial metaphor, because of course the digital revolution has taken place in our pockets and we didn't really see anything happening until it was maybe, I wouldn't say too late, because we're becoming more and more conscious about it. Accountability, who is responsible, standard, certification, audit, internal boards, how to access information, the transparency of it all, which category of information should be made available to which stakeholders. We've been speaking about all the stakeholders. So how do we then, when we speak about ethics by design, how do we plan, sometimes it works too quickly, how do we plan for ethics and community with new AI in courts? How do we make sure there is this transparency, the accountability, the reliability, rules for ethical automated decision making by design? How do we make sure this happens? We've been speaking about human rights, well-being, accountability, transparency, and awareness of misuse. All of these issues, I think, will be up for the discussion afterwards. Thank you.
Indeed. Thank you very much, Patrick. Yes, you gave great teasers for further discussion. And indeed, a trust is a very human thing. It's very hard to build. It's very easy to lose. We know that the European Commission is working hard for trusted technologies and human-centric internet for the next generation. So Olivier, please, the floor is yours.
So first of all, I'd like to thank SEEDIG for the invitation. I think it's a very good moment to speak about these issues. It's also very good that there is the continuity between SEEDIG, between Eurodig, and leading to the IGF. It matches well the change of political governance inside the European Union. We will have the European elections, we will have a new college, and I think the discussion we have here can really feed into the agenda of the next college and the next European Parliament. So on the issue of trust, I would say there is nothing new really with trust. It has always been at the very basis of the functioning of our economy or our society. But the thing is that in the pre-internet world, in the offline world, I think it was easier to establish and maintain trust because you are interacting with a limited number of people physically, so it's easy to do the testing that Patrick was mentioning. You were interacting with established players, a bank, a retailer. You have been using this bank for a long time. you can trust it. In the online world, everything is changed. Again, because of the scale, again, because of the speeds. You don't have dozens of friends, you have hundreds of thousands even of connections online. You cannot trust them as you would trust people you interact with daily. You have new players, you interact with new players online, some that you see, some that you don't see. And they have a very different business model. They collect data, they use your personal data to provide new services, to target you as a consumer, or even as a voter. And this is only going to increase in the future. Christian from the Green Party was mentioning the advent of the Internet of Things. Yes, there will be more connected objects, more data will be collected. There will be more importance into our digital environment. You need to trust a car when it's going to drive you and your family on the highway. That's even a vital issue. So the issue of trust in the online world is specific and is bigger in a way than in the offline or pre-internet world. I think also people have left the basic digital optimism age. So until recently, I think people knew more or less that online providers were using their data, but they would not care too much and still continue using it. But there have been now a number of examples, data breaches, examples where data have been misused, and I don't need to quote the Cambridge Analytica scandal, for example, which have really raised awareness of everyone about the importance of controlling their data. So I think there is opening now from the public at large to adopt a different solution which will allow to ensure confidentiality of communications, solution which will allow people to manage their privacy settings. So we have to use this moment to develop this internet of trust. We can base ourselves on our regulatory framework. We'll come back to that. We have a very advanced regulatory framework in Europe, that is GDPR, but it was mentioned in previous panels. We have also all the work we do on cybersecurity, all the work we are currently doing on online disinformation, for example, to ensure that the European elections are held in a fair way. So we have to build on that, implement this framework. We have to develop the technologies also. This is really key. I think we have come to realize that the normative action has to be complemented by investment in technologies. So investment in technologies that allow end users to manage better their personal data, but also investment in technologies that allow to design the digital technologies of tomorrow in a trustworthy, ethical way. And in a way, I think it's a win-win situation. We need to convince people that the digital environment is trustworthy if we want everyone to join the digital transformation, which is only at the start. Everything is going to change in the next years. Transport, healthcare, industry, everything. And we really need to convince people that they are safe in this digital transformation. And it's also a win for I think for the private sector. They can show that they care for their consumers, and they can gain even a competitive advantage by providing solutions which are trustworthy by design. This is what I would say as introduction.
Okay, thank you very much, Olivier. This was very interesting, and also you touched upon the economics of trust and the investment, and I'm sure we're going to be discussing that further. Now I would like to turn to Jovan, who knows the region very well and who is in charge with a very hard task of better global cooperation. So we would love to hear your insights. Thank you.
Thank you. Could you hear me? Could you hear me now? Much better. Okay. Well, okay. Let me start with this question. Could you hear me? And to Patrick's analogy with the airplanes. when we enter airplanes, we rarely ask, although we sometimes think, but we rarely ask, could you fly? Because we presume that the airplane should fly. With, with different success these days, unfortunately. But it reveals the element in our subconsciousness. We trust airlines and airplanes, but we do not trust necessarily Skype or WebEx or whatever we use online. And it is the most frequent question asked in online communication. Can you hear me? I will, Patrick, introduce the concept of intimacy. And don't worry, I won't go further with developing this concept, especially online, it's not appropriate. But I think he related to a really human element in the understanding trust. And it's always useful to bring the general, broader concept to our direct experience. Probably without trust, I wouldn't be able to get out of my bed this morning. There are so many elements in our daily routines which are related to trust. Trust into things that we do not see, trust which are in a way given. And let me get back to this event that you are attending today. Most of us are with the SEEDIG thanks to the trust in what Sorina Teleanu is doing. At least myself, whenever Sorina calls me to attend the event, I know that that event will be well prepared, that there are no some strange agendas behind it, that what you see is what you get, and that it will work well. And it was proven this morning. Sorina, knowing that I may get sometimes a bit lost, she called me and alerted me that I should be on time at the session, that I should click on the right link. And it is really a very, very deep trust in a person who is organizing the event. Now, Sorina is Sorina, but now how to move this trust in person into trust in institutions? We trust SEEDIG based on Sorina's work. And that bridge between individuals and intimate relations of the trust, which Patrick mentioned, and trust in institutions is a huge and I would say crucial step that we have to make. Personally speaking, I'm a bit skeptical in big systems attempts to make trust working, because there is an inbuilt contradiction between intimate aspects of trust and the attempts of the big systems to make a trust as an institutional solution. Now you ask us to define trust and to make a few reflections, and I would be a bit provocative based on my experience of touring the world the last 12 months in my capacity as executive director of the panel. We presume that trust is failing, but what I've been hearing from other continents is that people trust the internet and they trust online space. If you go to China or if you consult the online service, you can see very high level of trust. You can see the high level of trust in Africa. And it's not surprising, internet and digital is always associated with building people, getting people out of poverty, and this is a tool, which is a tool of empowerment. Therefore, we have to be careful when we are making diagnoses about trust, and it is very often shaped by regional developments. I'm coming from Southeast Europe, and I know that online adds to general distrust in societies in that region, which is historical, and we can go into the reasons why it is happening. Another counterintuitive element is that we are reading that people do not trust Facebook, but we are hearing that there are more and more users of Facebook. Therefore, there are some elements which are a bit counterintuitive, and I think the answers could be found in understanding the concept of trust as intimate, human, what Olivier indicated, what Patrick mentioned, but also understanding that trust is not binary. We tend to see all things in digital world or ones and zeros. Trust is very, very analog. You can have a question of need for a strong trust when issues are a matter of our life and survival, or let's say easy trust or weak trust, you know, that bus will work in the morning or there will be the transport system will work. There was also thick trust. Thick trust, Patrick mentioned this saying from the Netherlands. There is a saying in the Balkans that in order to trust people, you need to eat together 1 kilo of salt. Not immediately, you know, salt is consumed in the small dosages, but you need to spend some time with somebody. This is this thick trust, which takes time, energy, engagement. And there is the thin trust, which unfortunately is dominant trust these days. Trust in ad hoc, casual relations, and that's that. Therefore, there is a sort of graphics: strong trust, weak trust, thick trust, thin trust. And then there is a trust, different type of trust. I trust now my computer that it will work. I more or less trust the WebEx that it will get me to this lovely room in Bucharest. And by the way, I miss being not being there. I can see that it's nice sounding and nice group of people, and I'm sure that it is also great fun to be there, which is important also for trust building. We have a trust in tech companies, which is the major issue of nowadays trust. We have a trust in governments and public institutions, because through social contract, we ask governments to save us from anarchy, to protect our rights, to make democracy working, to make markets working. And maybe these days governments not always delivering on that tacit social contract. I will conclude this introductory statement by the quoting of one of the heroes of my youth. I guess Patrick, maybe Olivier can recall them. His name was Sledgehammer. He used to say, "Trust, I know what I'm doing." It was his famous line in his sort of documentaries or his broadcastings. We have to trust more. We have to find the ways how to trust, but we have also to verify and to find the mechanisms, legal, social, common sense mechanisms to verify trust and to ensure that, like with the SEEDIG, we can move from trust in one person or a group of people into trust of organizations. We shouldn't go the other way around, because we have noticed quite a few failures of the trust in the big systems. Therefore, this is just the introductory remark, and I'm sure there will be many interesting questions. And one big regard from Geneva. And thank you for being tolerant with my bit extensive introduction. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Jovan. This is the perfect transition point to our video prepared by SEEDIG Youth School Fellows. A series of interviews. It's a very short video, so we'll get back to our speakers and the audience for their comments. So, do we have the video available? Let's enjoy.
From my personal experience, I had issues with private companies which have gathered my personal data without my permission and used it for commercial purposes, such as target marketing.
I do trust the internet when I want to search about something. I don't usually trust the internet when I have to buy something. I don't know who's on the other side.
Onda uvijek arabaşı olsa böyle fake news yarısı kapsayın uli maçı upravo gadavamo su titoli informacija მაგრამ როგორც წესი ამ გადამოწმების შემდეგ
ეს უფლებები საჯარო პირები არიან და ცნობილები არიან, ვფიქრობ, რომ იმათი ინტერესები დაცული არ არის და ძალიან ბევრი ფარული ჩანაწერი ვცოლდება, რომელიც არ უნდა ვცოლდებოდეს.
Ne potpuno zainteresirani.
Potpuno sam s digitalnim tehnologijama, ali sam donekle spreman da se odreknem svoje privatnosti ako je to neki cilj kolektivne bezbednosti i sigurnosti.
Zato što nisam dovoljno informisana o načinu funkcionisanja kompanija, svedoci smo da se u periodu globalizacije i razvoja tehnologije i protivrečnosti globalizacije dovodi do toga da je pitanje pouzdanosti digitalnih tehnologija sve manje.
Prihvatam taj rizik na sebe
kad vidimo moja privatnost i tako dalje. Zdravo se prevoda iz razloga što nisam u situaciji da mogu dobijem.
Bad people can make weapons out of anything. So to say don't use the internet because bad things happen, I don't think that's where I go back.
The thing is that I don't have much of information to hide, so...
Mislim da pre svega treba raditi na medijskoj informacijalnoj pismenosti mladih, uključujući digitalne tehnologije. Tako da tek onda kada zapravo budemo znali šta su digitalne tehnologije, šta su opasnosti digitalnih medija i na koji način da se zaštitimo, vjerojatno ćemo imati veće poverenje u korištenju istih i neće nam biti, to jest neće biti toliko lako plasirati dezinformacije.
Pa ja mislim da ipak internet ne može da bude potpuno deregulisan, mora da postoje neka pravila i da mislim da možda da se kako se doneli neki zakoni koji se primenili.
Medijski opismenjavanje stanovništva, kako bismo povećali poverenje, a ili kada bi se uvela neka malo bolje kontrola u to što se plasira na materijalna cenzura, tako da nisam baš sigurno šta je bilo pravo rješenje.
To enhance digital trust, first we need to adopt legislation, and I also think that more resources should be devoted towards cybersecurity.
Yes, thank you. This was interesting. So in a very short video, we already heard the infamous "I have nothing to hide" argument. And also, one person was willing to sacrifice some of his privacy for the sake of security. So I'm really curious about your comments. Olivier, perhaps you would like to?
I can start, yeah. No, I mean, maybe we can stop the panel here. I mean, we had all the important ideas explained in this video. I think many of the people said, I do not trust the online providers, but I use their services anyway. And they also said, I do not know whether my privacy is safeguarded or not. And I think this is where we need to act. We need to make sure that these online providers do provide better privacy, or that we propose alternatives to the existing solutions. Also, I think an important part is getting people to understand how this works, so that they can make the difference between real issues and things which are already solved. So that's, and one of the person in the interview mentioned the issue of education. Also, I think it's very interesting that it was not only about data protection, but they also evoked the issue of media, quality of media, how to make sure that the information on the internet is of good quality, is verified, and one of them said, I do it myself and then I trust it. And I think it's interesting that I mean, this is never an easy issue. Every time you discuss about these issues, you have to make some balancing. So, for example, you want to make the internet avoid that there is online disinformation on the internet, but you don't want a minister of truth. You don't want censorship. You want to ensure data protection, but at the same time, you want to ensure that the cyber criminals cannot hide it behind to make the internet less safe. So a lot of these questions are very important, and we'll cover them, I hope, in the panel.
Jovan, maybe your quick remarks. What surprised you the most, or no surprises?
No surprises. I think our region is a region of suspicions, and region that you don't trust easily, even among younger generation. Although they're most trust, they trust more than I thought. But the reason is very simple. This region was governed by external forces in politics, in the economy for too long. And people start developing a bit of skeptical view about any big system. What I really was for me underlying, and probably I heard what I wanted to hear, you know how it works in human psychology, is this element of analog answers. It's not binary. Yes, we don't trust internet providers, but we use the internet. Yes, we understand what's going on, but still we are providing our data. And that analog element, not binary, is probably key for a policy. How to make it balance with the check and balances in policy making, with hearing different views, with having sandboxes. You introduce policy and then you check after 1 year if it functions. That inbuilt flexibility is the answer for the analog nature of the problems of trust, and I would say almost any problem of digital policy. Over to you.
Also, when I look around the room here, in fact, what we're speaking about, the digital transition, is something that has happened in a lifetime, basically. That is, if I look back at my own youth, the reality was completely different. So, probably for the first time in history, we're confronted with what we've called a digital revolution that poses a number of challenges to humanity, to all of us, of all generations, and generations move very quickly. I see that even if you have a youth section, the youth section is already, there's already a next generation. When I look at how children deal with digital technology, it's already completely different. They have already completely different expectations. They have already completely different ways of using those digital tools. They're probably more critical than the generation of my kind that was confronted with black and white television in the 60s and color television in the 70s. So we're talking about a revolution that is happening within one lifetime. And that poses a number of challenges, including trust, of what these technologies will bring us. What are the dangers of it? And of course, traditionally, we first focus on the dangers. We're first scared. We use it all because it's all very helpful. I wouldn't find my way around Bucharest without Google Maps or any of the other tools, quite frankly. So we're all using and putting trust in a way because we have, as some in the video also explained, we have no other choice. So we're confronted with a transition that we will have to which we will have to find an answer altogether.
Thank you. Indeed, the digital transformation revolution, however you call it, is happening already. And the digital natives of this revolution, the youth, millennials. I was talking to Anna yesterday and she was like, no, millennials are not young anymore. We have Generation Z. So I don't feel so old suddenly, but we see that in young generations, for instance, we don't see the analog concept of privacy that most of the people in the audience share. So I would like to turn to Anna because we have some fun exercises to involve you in the discussion as well. Of course, we're going to have some Q&A and comment sessions coming up, but please bear with us. Is the Menti screen ready? Yep.
Hi. So for those of you who were in our meetings for Youth School, the online components, you are more or less familiar with Mentimeter. For those of you who are not, take any device that you have, laptop, mobile phone, or anything, and go to menti.com, and then use this code 434933 to log in, and please give us more information. We will ask 3 questions now and 2 more questions, but later on during the session to introduce other topics that we have today. So first question is, who do you trust more with your data? Governments, tech companies, or... Oh, there we go. So it will be very interactive. As you answer, the data will change on the screen. We will give like 1 more minute for everyone to answer and then comment on what we just saw. course, you're also allowed to. Okay, that's a minute. So, would you like to comment on, or should we proceed with all three?
Because yeah, the all three questions is going to feed the next discussion.
Okay.
So we see 16% trust in governments, 5% trust in tech companies, and 79% don't trust them both. So that tells a lot. So this is another question.
It's, I know my rights under privacy and digital policy laws. Yes, no. So we will give until 12:24, let's say. So we can quickly move on to the other question. Wow, you guys are fast. Okay, we can move on to the other one. And I am in charge of my own data. Yes, no.
So the majority said that they knew their rights, but yet they're not fully in charge of their own data, apparently. Okay, thank you very much. This was brilliant. This is always fun to see on the big screen. So I think the level of erosion of trust already established in the first question, and then awareness of rights is not so bad, but that doesn't necessarily imply that people feel empowered. So this leads us to the first round of discussion on the ideal policy environment for trust. We're seeing a lot of convergence, different frameworks for privacy and data protection for starters. We have the GDPR, Council of Europe Convention. There are lots of national data protection laws, which has some very serious data governance provisions, also provisions for transparency and accountability. And this is supposed to build trust, but is that enough? And how do we have the implementation and enforcement challenges for data governance and transparency and accountability provisions, and the collaborative processes that are currently in force? So how do we create the ideal policy environment for trust? I would like to start with Olivier on this. Thank you.
Starting maybe with comments on the interesting polls, I think it confirms my personal impression that people in general, maybe this assembly is more aware than average, but people more or less know their rights, because privacy has been heavily discussed. There have been all these data breaches cases, so people know about it and know what are their rights, but they don't feel in charge. So they don't feel in charge because they don't have the options. So we need to provide the options for people to be in charge. The first question I would really like to understand, maybe from the audience at a later point, what is behind. I'm wondering if it's really that people don't trust governments for managing their data, or if it is that people don't trust government tout court. So I would be interested to understand better. Now, on your question on the regulatory framework, policy framework, I think in the European Union we are quite, I think we are well positioned. We have a very advanced regulatory framework, and this is because we have fundamental rights which are enshrined in the treaties. So in the European treaties, there are a number of fundamental rights that need to be protected, and of course we need to develop the instruments to implement those rights. And this is what we have done in the course of the years through a number of policy initiatives. The most famous one is, of course, GDPR. I'm not going now to give the details of GDPR because I'm sure in the room there are people who are much more specialists than I am. I would make a couple of remarks. The first remark is that GDPR, in fact, and data protection is not new. I mean, there have been data protection laws in Europe and outside Europe for 20 years already. What GDPR does is that it sets a common rule across the European Union. So there is much more homogeneity for the data subject, but also for the companies. They are subject to one set of rules. They interact with one data protection authority in case of a problem. The other thing I would say with GDPR, there were a lot of concerns on the 25th of May of last year when it was applied, that data protection authorities would immediately start finding every company not 100% compliant with GDPR. Of course, this did not happen because the purpose is not to fine organization. The purpose is to make sure that personal data are better protected in Europe. So what DPAs have done, of course, there have been cases and there have been fines, but the bulk of their work is to really accompany the implementation of GDPR, make sure that everyone understands how it works. Everyone understands, for example, that GDPR is a proportionate instrument. It's based on a risk-based approach. So you don't ask the same thing from an SME who has a database with the names of their customers and from a large social network whose business it is to manage and to exploit personal data. So we are now in this phase of implementing GDPR, and it will still take some time, of course, to have full protection of the personal data of Europeans. GDPR is not the only tool. We have in the previous panel, but also in the keynote interventions, we have mentioned a number of other instruments which are, I think, equally important. Cybersecurity, of course. And we have done a lot there in the European Union to improve cybersecurity in the course of the last years. Because 10 years ago, there was not much in terms of cybersecurity framework inside the European Union. And we have really built a comprehensive framework in the course of the last 5 years, I would say. We have mentioned already the NIS directive. We have mentioned the reinforcement of the cybersecurity agency, the launch of a certification framework for IT products and services. So we have a number of initiatives which aim at improving the cybersecurity framework in Europe, and this is based both on increasing capacity, increasing awareness, and above all, I think, increasing cooperation between states, cooperation between public authorities and public and private organizations. I could also mention EIDAS, so the fact that we have now an interoperable electronic identity system in Europe, which is fully secure. And one point which I wanted to spend maybe a bit more time is, and it was mentioned by the youngsters in the videos, is the issue of online disinformation. So there the Commission has launched an initiative. It's very much self-regulatory initiative. So we work together with the platforms to try to remove online disinformation. We do it in particular in the context of the European elections. So we work with the social media platforms, we work with media platforms, with search engines to make sure that clearly identified online disinformation is removed, to remove fake accounts, and to increase in general transparency and the possibility to identify this type of information. So this is interesting because you see the variety of approach we have. We go from real regulation, GDPR, up to self-regulatory instrument, and I think we need this whole set of instruments to tackle the issue of ensuring trust. I think so. again, I think it's very important that we discuss it today. It will feed into the discussion at global level, but also in preparing the agenda for the next European Commission and European Parliament. I think it will for sure remain a key priority. We will have to see how exactly it's going to be framed, but that's why it's important to have this conversation. We need to get the input from all the parties to know where are the concerns, where are the issues, and what should be the priority actions we should launch in the course of the next 5 years.
Thank you very much, Olivier. Indeed, collaboration is not like a nice-to-have thing when it comes to trust. It's essential. Now I'd like to turn to Patrick. The Council of Europe has been a pioneer in the privacy sphere with the Convention 108, which recently had a facelift, I might say. So what are your insights on the policy frameworks for building trust?
I'm not so much into facelifts, quite honestly. I think we, in the end, have developed a completely new instrument. May I try to come back to the slide presentation? I don't know if the colleagues there. Okay. Sorry, this takes a bit of time because the pointer doesn't. I'm sorry, I don't want to be quoting Mark Zuckerberg all the time, but recently said that he believed new regulation was needed in 4 areas: harmful content, election integrity, privacy, data portability. And in order not only to quote Facebook, but also Microsoft President Brad Smith posted his top 10 technical issues for 2019: privacy, disinformation, digital diplomacy, ethics challenges for artificial intelligence, the people's side of technology, sovereignty, human rights, and the cloud. I think what I would like to say there is that a couple of things. First of all, for the Council of Europe, the reason why we're here in SEEDIG is that fundamentally the Council of Europe believes in the fact that these developments are of such importance that we need to take into account the reasoning, logics, aspirations, expectations of a variety of stakeholders. That is, we cannot do this governments alone. And that is crucial for the development of the internet of the future and the digital development of the future. We cannot solely be working as governments trying to impose, even though I come from an intergovernmental institution that is basically a diplomatic organization on the construct of 19th century diplomacy. We cannot do this alone. It has to be done together with the technical companies, with the academia, with the service providers, with all the stakeholders have to be there. Civil society has to be there. So in any conclusions of this SEEDIG, I think that is something that is to be mentioned. Second, I believe that solutions can only be global. Even though I come from a regional platform, solutions can only be global. That's why our data protection convention is a global convention. And you mentioned our actions in the United States last week, where we promoted Convention 108. The United States has a completely different vision of what privacy is and how it should be exploited. But at the same time, it is the US-based companies that are pushing the US legislators to ensure that a legislation similar to the GDPR, and I'm glad to say that the legislation similar to GDPR is Convention 108 Plus. That's the modernized convention, which is mentioned in the GDPR as a tool, as a global tool. I think that is important because this is an existing instrument to which, for example, also the Russian Federation was the first to put its signature to. That's important. These are important developments. A third, I already mentioned data protection, cybercrime as global tools, which are increasingly, not only within the Council of Europe, but also at a global level, becoming key instruments. And you've heard my colleague Georgi this morning already on this. A last element is maybe the whole question of certification. We have to look into it. I was half-jokingly discussing this with Frederick Dong in the group. He's reading his emails, but he's still listening to what I'm saying. Is a question of certification. If tools, digital tools, are being developed in the future, to which extent, and we're speaking about privacy by design, we're speaking about human rights by design, we're speaking about security by design, how are we going to assess those? And it comes back to this measured trust. Trust has to be built on something that is measurable. When it's a relationship that is not an interpersonal relationship, but a relationship between an entity, anonymous entity, and an individual, I think we need to be able to, in one way or another, assess what is the trustworthiness. And I think that's also in the interest of the technical industry, and it is in the interest of the private industry in general. Because there's a lot of types of companies out there. They're not all interested in ethics. They're not all interested in human rights. So to which extent, as we did, for example, with our Medicrime Convention at the level of the Council of Europe, or the establishment of the European Pharmacopoeia, to look into the standardization of the production of medicine and the certification that the medication that we are producing is not counterproductive to our health. Okay, the comparison doesn't work at all levels, but we have to look into it. And that type of thinking needs to go on. We're only at a very beginning of the digital developments. I think on the one side there is an enormous belief that we will go much faster and much more rapidly than what we have done so far. On the other side there's a lot of fear about it. So we need to be able to build in elements of trust, and that is not something that happens without doing something about it. That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you very much.
One last thing, I also believe, because I enumerated multi-stakeholder, global, trustworthy, I think also intergenerational is quite an important aspect of this development.
Thank you very much. Indeed, cooperation between generations, between states, between stakeholders is essential, and I would like to turn to Jovan. Can we have Jovan on the screen again?
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
Good. Now, one terminological issue, I would argue to use the term nurturing trust. I don't believe that we can build trust. Build as a verb implies that somebody comes from outside and build house or build something, or that would be just always language is important for discussing such a delicate subject as trust. I cannot add that much to what Olivier and Patrick listed as legal tools. I would just develop the last point from Patrick's presentation on certificates. Somehow, we completely ignore the question of certification in the digital world. When we, and I say we as teachers, I'm teaching internet governance and digital policy, we typically focus on DNS system, domain names, and cybersecurity and other issues. And certification, for some strange reason, is out of the radar of the digital community and IG communities. And recently, at ETH, in Zurich, the famous polytechnic, I heard that with quite a solid technical backing, that certificates even contain potential kill switch for the internet. well, my basic assumption was that internet is robust because it's decentralized nature, but people showed me and proved in practice how the certificates could be the kill switch. Therefore, this is on certificates, and I think we should rely more. But let me add to this toolkit, which Olivier and Patrick started developing. One element would be clarity. I think that mistrust thrives in confusion. Whatever clarity we have, clarity in communication, clarity in roles and responsibilities of different actors. Governments have to ensure the public order. They have to protect market, democracy. Businesses should make money and make a profit. I like when Mr. Zuckerberg tells us that, Mark, okay, I'll correct, when Mark tells us that he wants to do great things for community and for us, that's fine. But ultimate motive is that he should make a profit, and it's fine. By making a profit, he provides service for the society, and this is perfectly fine. Civil society should basically hold all of these people accountable. And if we get back to the core roles and responsibilities of different actors, and then whoever can do more, that's fine. But I think this confusion which currently exists is one of the major sources of mistrust. Transparency, it was mentioned, it's basically the key. The more transparency we have, the better it is. Using of some of the traditional trust nurturing, trust building exercises from, for example, confidence building measures in security field. They're sometimes trivial that you have a phone number that you can call on the other side and ask, hey guys, are you really sending the nuclear rockets to us or not? You know, the famous red line between Washington and Moscow from the Cold War. We may need this sort of simple confidence building measure between CERTs or whoever is involved in this process. Third-party oversight, trust but verify. This is very important. Also, we should avoid grand design. You probably noticed from my lecture that I'm very skeptical about grand design. Look for small things, look for the signals. Signals are extremely important in nurturing trust. People read between lines. If you ask SEEDIG people, have your say, and you ignore what they say, which is not the case in the case of SEEDIG, unlike some other initiatives, next time people will say, okay, I don't trust these people. They ask me to give my opinion, and they even don't tell me, listen, we disagree with your opinion. That's perfectly fine. Therefore, those small signals are extremely, extremely important in nurturing trust, which I have to admit, sometimes in big systems we forget. Now, one caveat in this toolkit is that we should be aware that trust is not always, by definition, positive concepts or contribution to the positive developments. Trust within the small system could be strong, but then it can create distrust towards outside actors. And in this context, I would like to draw your attention to one really excellent research. And it's not that I was a supervisor, but it was thanks to her great work. Desiree Milosevic did MA thesis and research on trust in internet governance space. And I know if Desiree, she should be at this panel more than myself. She analyzed trust within the regional internet registries. And one of the findings is that there is a huge capacity of the trust within this network and relatively suspicious towards actors from outside this network. I think we have to understand that element when we are discussing, let's say, redesign of IGF and different spaces. Communities, which is very human and very expectable, tends to look inwards, tends to create trust within the small community, and potentially considers others as others. Now, it is very human, and I don't think that it should be changed, and it shouldn't be changed. But we have to be aware of this aspect, especially when we have challenges, the digital requires communication beyond our community. Whether it is community of internet operators, internet service providers, diplomatic community of people discussing cybersecurity, or in Council of Europe privacy and data. If you analyze these communities, many of these communities are inwards looking, very tight, and through the signals, even when they say, oh, we want inclusion, but when you really analyze through the signals, you realize that there are mechanisms which are terminological, positioning, framing, which basically exclude the people from outside. Therefore, that's extremely crucial for building trust in institutions. And please try to contact Desiree and try to see. Hey, Desiree, hi. Okay. Okay, good. That's the last comment on the bit of concern about of trust and handling it with care. Over to you.
Before we turn to Desiree for some quick comments, we also have another fun exercise. This time it's going to be a word cloud.
Yes, and some of you were already fast enough to answer it. I don't know if that was possible, but still we have 8 answers. So our next Mentimeter question will be, my biggest concern while deciding whether or not to trust digital technologies.
Okay, so as you are entering your replies, Desiree, would you care for? Yes, thank you. The mic is not working.
It's always nice to be put on the spot. So thank you, Jovan, for these kind words. I did do a research looking especially at the technical communities and how they perceive trust. So one thing that we heard now at the panel is that we need to measure trust, but it's very difficult to measure trust. We can only have a way of perceiving how a particular community perceives trust and get more and further understanding into some of these things, what trust or trustworthiness means. Trustworthiness is really the word we're talking about because it means it's a proven trust, that it has been repeated. So that's where we need to build on. But I think I have a question for the panel. Maybe that's more interesting than telling you more about my dissertation. And that is something that I wasn't able to answer, or many people that I come in touch with. And that is what kind of things should we build within the institution, among communities, when the trust collapses? What kind of mechanisms and processes should we be thinking about? Because we learned it's so easy to lose, but it takes a lot of time to build trust. So if anybody would like to tackle that on, and what alternative scenarios could we imagine in case of collapse in trust on the internet? Thank you.
Okay. Would any of you like to respond? Yes.
Just a quick response on this one. I think we have to avoid that. And to avoid that, we have to prepare ourselves. So when the Cambridge Analytica scandal came out, we were ready. We had the GDPR adopted. When there will be, and I hope there is not, but that when there is a big cyber attack in one part of Europe, we have the NIS directive, we have the cybersecurity certification framework, we will be ready. So I think we have absolutely to avoid this collapse in trust by anticipating as much as possible. I think that would be that's how we see it, at least.
Thank you. Patrick, maybe?
I think the biggest concern is ignorance, I would say. We really need to, as a society, rethink our education system and adapt it to the 21st century. In many cases, we're still working with tools, I think, at best prepared for the 20th century, but in many cases prepared for the 19th century. Our education system has not been able to, for the time being, I'm not speaking for every country necessarily, and there are some extremely good examples. But when we're saying about, speaking about digital literacy, information literacy, to which extent are we prepared for this? Some countries have taken initiatives in this respect, but many others have not, are still focusing on ensuring that a certain system is continued without necessarily looking into the critical capacities and competencies that we need to develop in order to prepare our children, but also lifelong learning. I have a host mother when I was an exchange student to the United States 40 years ago. She is 89 and she is using digital tools. We need to, again, intergenerationally, be prepared for living in today's society.
Thank you. Indeed, what you mentioned, education, I think in that sense, it's better to work for preventing this kind of collapses. Rather, it's always easier to, because especially when you're talking about privacy, once privacy is violated, then there's very little you can do in the first place. So moving forward to the discussion, I would like to ask the insights of the speakers on emerging technologies, such as IoT and AI, already mentioned earlier. So we're talking about smart devices. They're not necessarily smart. They can be spying on us and they can be talking behind our back, which is not a good thing for people nor for machines. And how do we include the ethics in the discussion? How do we ensure trust by design to make sure that security, privacy, and ethical features are built into the products and services that we use in our everyday life from the start? And which actions do we need to be taken? And also I'm looking at the audience's reactions to their biggest concern while deciding whether or not to trust digital technologies. Some people don't trust this particular Mentimeter tool, fair enough. Privacy security, still I can see in a big concern. Advertisements, the bubble, spam, hacking, manipulation is a big concern. Monetizing my data, so as data is the new oil. I don't want to start that discussion here, but I would like to start the discussion with Olivier again. Thank you.
So on the technology side, yes, this is equally as important as the normative side, I would say. And I would like to focus on two areas where I think we are making swift progress and really in anticipation, that is artificial intelligence and blockchain. So you have probably seen on artificial intelligence, we have gathered a group of experts, multi-stakeholder model also, to devise ethical guidelines, ethical principles. And when you read these principles, they would apply, I think, to not only to artificial intelligence, but to many technology areas on how you should develop a technology to make sure that it is fair, non-discriminatory, accountable, transparent, etc. And this is, you see the approach that we are following there. It's a nascent technology. Of course, there is already a lot of artificial intelligence around us. A lot of the results of our search queries are based on very intelligent algorithms, but it's only the beginning. I mean, in the future, the cars will be autonomous. You will have AI assistants that will assist you in your personal life, that will filter probably a lot of the information you get from the internet or even from other people. So you see that the stakes are really, really high. Artificial intelligence can really transform the society. It can transform even the mind of people. So we need to make sure that there are a number of principles that are respected, such as keeping human in control, making sure that there is no bias or discrimination in the way these algorithms work or in the data that they are using. We need to make sure that, because they are going to be complex algorithm involving different players, we need to see how to distribute the liability, for example, in such complex environments. So we are reflecting on that. We have this group has proposed a number of principles. Now we are going to test them. We have asked the community to test them, to get back to us and to say, okay, how they can be improved, how their implementation can be improved. And that is the first step in terms of setting up the right framework for the development of this important technology. It comes with other actions. One is on skills. We need to learn to use these technologies. We need to learn to be in an environment where many of the tasks will be done by intelligent agents. And very important, I think, we need to invest. If we do not invest, if we do not develop the technologies here in Europe, then we will simply import the technologies as they are conceived elsewhere. So we are also very ambitious in terms of investment. So this is our approach on AI. The other point I wanted to mention is blockchain, because in a way technology creates loopholes in terms of data protection, but it also proposes solutions. So I think blockchain is one of those technologies that propose solutions to the issue of trust. It will allow basically decentralized governance of your own data. So meaning that you can have direct transaction with your peers without having to rely on an intermediary in a secure way. There are a lot of challenges, of course, in terms of security, in terms of scalability, in terms of energy consumption, in terms of the model. There are different models of blockchain. Are all of them really decentralized? And to try to govern that, we have set up an association. So the name the acronym is a bit complex. It's called INATBA. It's the International Association for Trusted Blockchain Applications, sorry. And it's open to the multi-stakeholder community, and the idea is to discuss globally, it's not European only initiative, the governance of blockchain, make the links with the governments to make sure that the regulations that will be developed, the policies that will be developed serve the development of the technology, make sure that the technology is used in different vertical sectors and is exploited at its maximum. So here as well we have this multi-stakeholder approach. And maybe just one last point, I would like to mention the initiative that I'm personally carrying out, which is called Next Generation Internet. The purpose there is to develop the building blocks of the Internet of tomorrow, an Internet that is, of course, more trustworthy, more secure, more decentralized. And we are investing in innovators. So we are funding directly people who have ideas, people who develop a piece of open source software to ensure secure communication, people who develop a piece of software to allow people to better manage their privacy settings. We have a number of calls ongoing. We will launch a new wave of call in the coming months. So I would also encourage the innovators in the room to participate, because I think it's important that we develop also the technologies, that we don't only base ourselves on our values, our normative approach, but that we propose the solution to implement those values and these norms.
Thank you very much. I'd like to turn to Jovan now. for how to be prepared for emerging technologies. We call them emerging, but they are here.
Yeah, well, we should prepare like we are preparing for earthquakes. Earthquakes are in a way unavoidable because of what's going on under us in the core of our ball, the great globe, and we cannot predict where. Well, we can to some extent when earthquake will happen, but we can prepare for it. And I think that metaphor should be used. In the same time, we should keep in mind that technology has this magical element. And isn't it magical? Just step back that I can speak from whatever is 1,000 kilometers plus from Bucharest and stay with you in a way virtually and discuss these issues. And with AI and these things, this magical element is coming more and more into force. Now, like with any magic, you have white, black magic, and you have all sorts of taxonomy of magics. On this point, there is one major risk that we should be aware with the new technology. It is difference and the gap between possibilities and reality. This gap we are seeing across digital field and in particular with emerging technologies. Tech narrative is about possibilities. The sky is the limit. We can solve all of your problems. And then people realize that reality is different. And there are so many problems. Wikipedia came as inclusive online encyclopedia. Today you have only 5% of articles about Africa written by people from Africa. MOOC came as inclusive. You still remember in 2014, the person from suburb of Abuja connecting to MIT AI course. Nowadays, 90% of MOOC students are basically from the developed economies. Therefore, that gap between rhetorical possibilities, which are part of magic and part of business development, and reality is very dangerous, not only for digital field, but also for political stability. And I'm highlighting for political stability, because people started realizing gap between possibility narrative and reality narrative. And that's extremely important that we work on that gap, and with the clarity, this is what I highlighted at the very beginning, we need the clarity. Patrick and Olivier mentioned legal tools. I would add also discussions in the religious community. Vatican had recently conference on AI, and these people are dealing with ethics and with the purpose and with the general issues that we are facing. Therefore, we should go to the communities which are not usual suspects in our discussions. Gaming community, science fiction community. In Geneva, we had event what science fiction authors would advise to do. But this is very important to step back beyond our communities and engage people outside, because this discussion is not just technical discussion. This discussion is happening in Finnish saunas, in cafes in the Balkans, in the squares in the Middle East, in tea houses in Asia. That's, I think, the major challenge, to make a genuinely inclusive move, not just to proclaim to people outside you can participate. That's not enough. We have to make additional steps to involve these communities, and then they will feel the ownership, and in this way we would build the trust in artificial intelligence, blockchain, and whatever is coming ahead of us. Over to you.
We're running a bit late. We started 15 minutes late, so I was assuming we would have 15 minutes. We do, right? So I would like to turn to Patrick, particularly with regard to ethics. I know that the Council of Europe have various guidelines.
Yes, we do. And first of all, I say hello to Jovan, because our new technologies allow us to see him and listen to what he always very interestingly has to say, but it doesn't allow us to embrace him, which I would like to do, obviously, as a good friend. I have an incredible belief in artificial intelligence and new technology. I think we're in Europe primarily confronted with an individualized society, with an aging society. New technologies and artificial intelligence will allow us more and more to cater for the needs of our societies. Whether that be an aging population, whether that be a medically assisted population, whether that be a school education, I think there's an enormous amount of opportunities that are there. So let's not solely focus on what are the ethical pitfalls, but also let's focus primarily on what it will bring us. I think that is crucial. That is crucial. And I'll come back, because before we start saying of what needs to be developed, I'd like to come back to the PowerPoint again. Sorry, if that works. Well, these are the areas in which the Council of Europe is already active: personal data protection, action against cybercrime, cooperation with internet intermediaries, standards on algorithms and artificial intelligence. I will not go into that. Sorry, these are... I don't know exactly where to point. We also have to know what is already there. And we followed the evolution of the internet in terms of first looking at the level of the Committee of Ministers, looking at search engines, the Guide to Human Rights for Internet Users, the transboundary flow of information on the internet, net neutrality a couple of years ago. Now artificial intelligence is the buzzword. A couple of years ago, network neutrality was the buzzword, obviously. Internet freedom, the responsibilities of internet intermediaries, and now more recently on the manipulative capabilities of algorithmic processes. We did not wait for Zuckerberg to say what he thinks about what should be regulated in the future. We worked already with private business to work on democratic processes and micro-targeting, extremely important. Data protection issues related to artificial intelligence and big data, for example. Recently, also much more also on health-related data, which is considered as sensitive data under the new convention. Content moderation, cybersecurity. That I will not. Recently, we made a study on algorithms and human rights, the declaration I just mentioned, and we're also working on a draft recommendation on the human rights impacts of algorithmic systems. So this is also intended to provide guidance to member states to developing relevant policies on this. The key focus for the Council of Europe, on the one side, is of course the development of the cloud and cloud computing, cloud evidence, on which the Cybercrime Convention is now focusing, basically on evidence in the cloud and how to cooperate amongst police and judicial authorities amongst the member states or the participating states in the Cybercrime Convention, but also artificial intelligence. And we're not solely trying to elaborate ethical guidelines, but we're going a step further. That is to look at what is the impact of the AI activities or the AI on information society, on cybercrime, on data protection, on criminal law. For example, our criminal law steering committee is looking into detail about the criminal law aspects of self-driving cars. So these are very specific issues that we are looking into. I already mentioned that data protection, our committee is right now looking into facial recognition and the impact on data protection. By the way, our first data protection convention does not date back 20 years ago, but almost 40 years ago. 40 years ago, when we were already thinking about automated data protection and the use of automated processes of those data. So before actually the emergence of computers. We were talking about it and we were developing it. Efficiency of justice, we're very much looking into right now everything to do with predictive justice and developing tools for predictive justice, but also looking into the ethical guidelines to accompany predictive justice. These are practical tools. Culture and heritage, children's rights, anti-discrimination, gender equality. So as you see, there's already quite a number of areas in which the Council of Europe is directly active in elaborating very specific tools that accompany those developments.
Thank you very much. This is a very holistic approach. And unfortunately, we're running out of time, so I personally apologize to the audience, and I suggest we take the Q&A and the comment session to the lunch break, because I see that people are impatient, rightfully so. But I would like...
Yeah.
Okay. Questions? A couple of them, okay. 2, 3. The gentleman over there.
And here too.
Thank you. 2 questions. One for Patrick. Guten Tag, Patrick, who had met you. You mentioned the Russian Federation briefly, right? And also you mentioned a certain overhaul or reshuffle of the internet as we know it. Shall this reshuffle get some inspiration from the new internet of the Russian Federation? This is the first question. Second question is for Jovan. Hi, Jovan. You praised China for what you considered as a good level of trust. Is it China becoming a new champion of democracy? That were my 2 questions.
Maybe we should take all the questions and then...
And kind request to whoever is speaking, if you could also introduce yourself, that would be fair to everyone else speaking. Sonia, please.
Hi, this is Sonia Herring, SEEDIG Executive Committee member. I'm here to translate for Mr. Mustafa Elitaş, who is the chairman of the Industry, Trade, Energy and ICT Committee of the Parliament of the Republic of Turkey.
Değerli katılımcılar, değerli basın mensupları, hanımefendiler, beyefendiler, hepinizi saygıyla selamlıyorum. Bu yıl gerçekleşen 5. Güneydoğu Avrupa İnternet Bileşimi Diyaloğu'nun hayırlara vesile olmasını temenni ediyor. Hepinizi saygıyla selamlıyorum.
Distinguished participants, distinguished members of press, ladies and gentlemen, I wish the 5th Southeast European Dialogue on Internet Governance that is held this year to be successful and greet you all with great respect.
İnternetin hayatımıza girişi çok uzun bir zaman önceye dayanmıyor. Belki 20 yıllık, 30 yıllık mazisi var ama sosyal medyanın hayatımıza girişini 15 yıllık süre içerisinde çok hızlı bir değişim ve gelişimi de beraberinde getiriyor.
Internet has been around for a while, but with the entrance of social media, things have changed dramatically. Global digital growth does not lose its speed, with millions of new people coming onto the internet every week in the world. Today, 45% of the world's population is social media users.
Dünyadaki yaşayan insanların yaklaşık %45'i internette ve sosyal medya üzerinde birbirleriyle iletişim içerisindeler ve haberleşme sağlıyorlar. Hem de dünyadan haberdar olma imkanına sahip olmuş oluyorlar. Fakat Mr. Patrick'in söylediği çok önemli bir giriş cümlesi vardı. Bir kişi eğer sizinle ilgili hatıralarınızı, sevdiklerinizi, doğum gününüzü, ilgi alanınızı biliyorsa bu sizin arkadaşınız, kocanız değil, Mark Zuckerberg'tir dedi. Çok önemli bir tespitti. Aslında bunun üzerinde durulması gerekiyor. Biraz önce de Ana Hanım'ın yaptığı, salonda bulunan 70 kişiyle yaptığı anketten internette kime güveniyorsunuz diye yapılan soruya %79 hiç kimseye, %16 devlete, %5 de şirketlere. %16 devlete güvenenler burada kamuda çalışanlar mıdır bilmiyorum. Eğer kamuda çalışanlarsa devletimize ayıp olmasın diye herhalde güveniyor diye ifade etmiş olabilirler. Ama hiç kimseye güvenmemek aslında Mr. Patrick'in söylediği, tespit ettiği Facebook'un sahibiyle ilgili konunun çok önemli olduğunun altını çizen bir unsur diye düşünüyorum.
Mr. Patrick touched on something very important when he said if there's a person that knows everything about you from your friends to your birthday, but this person is not your partner or your close friend, it's Mark Zuckerberg. And we also saw when Miss Anna surveyed the participants here, and when 79% said they trusted no one online, but 16% said they trusted governments, I'm guessing that this 16% may be public servants and they just wanted to be polite. But the bottom
Perhaps you proceed with the question.
Şimdi soru aslında Mr. Jovan çok iyimser davranıyor. Mr. Oliver bir hukuk temsilcisi gibi, kanun yapıcı gibi konuları değerlendiriyor. Mr. Patrick de bizim duygularımızı, yaşadıklarımızı ve biri bizi gözetliyor dünyasında nasıl kendimizi güvenlik içerisinde hissederiz diye onunla ilgili içimizdeki düşünceleri hayata geçirmeye, sormaya gayret ediyor.
I think Mr. Jovan is an optimist, and Mr. Patrick is maybe playing the devil's advocate and portraying a bit darker picture as how technology can be the big brother in all of our lives.
Şimdi bu çeşitli ülkeler, teknolojide belli noktaya gelen ülkeler kendi sistemlerine çok güvenilmesi gerektiğini ifade ediyorlar. Ama haberlerde okunduğumuza göre Amerika Birleşik Devletleri Çin teknoloji şirketi ZTE'nin ülkesinden çıkmasını, en sonunda Fransa'nın Huawei firmasını 5G ile ilgili altyapısını oluşturmasını engelleyen bir düzenleme ortaya çıkardılar. Demek ki bizimle ilgili, kişisel verilerle ilgili çok önemli bilgiler bir yerde toplandığından dolayı Çin'e güven duyulmadığı, aslında bizim hani dervişin fikri neyse zikri odur diye bir ifade var ya Türkçedeki deyimle. Amerika bana güven ama Çin'e güvenme. Biraz önce soru soran arkadaşımız Rusya'ya güvenebilir miyiz diye Mr. Patrick'e verilerin depolanması ile ilgili ifade etti. Biz buradan internetle ilgili, sosyal medya ile ilgili bu gelişme ile ilgili sınırı nerede çizebilmeliyiz, nerede durabilmeliyiz, nasıl güvenmeliyiz?
Yes, thank you very much. I don't want to make Sorina even more mad. I also happen to be Turkish, so I can just wrap it up. So it was more like where to draw the line when building new policies, and you also mentioned data localization. I think this we can further discuss in the lunch break. I would like to have just like some final, like very short sentences from the speakers. I again apologize for. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Apologies, and I strongly encourage the audience to mingle and contact us. Yeah. Okay. If you say so. Yeah, of course. No. It's just final remarks and answers. Okay, don't be mad. Okay. So the questions first, Patrick, perhaps you would like to address the questions?
2 weeks ago we had the Russian Internet Governance Forum where I happened to be taking part as well. Two things on that. One is we need to ensure that the diversity of interlocutors is also assured in all of the countries in which we work. That is quite crucial. We are now doing a new study, maybe you know about it. We had a study on blocking, filtering and takedown of internet content in the 47 member states of the Council of Europe. We are now updating that with the recent legislation and practices which are active in all of our member states, and we focused on a couple of countries where there were major developments, and this will come out soon. There will be detailed answers to how we see, for example, within the Russian Federation, but also in Germany, developments are taking place with regards to the internet, and how the free, open space that the internet provides is continued. Does that, otherwise I'll have more precise answers later on, if you like. Is that okay? Yeah.
Jovan, would you like to reflect
Yes,
on this?
Quick comment. Clarity and precision is important for building trust. And I think what I really said in my comments is that according to all searches from Western local Asian organization, the level of trust in Asian countries, including China, Indonesia, India, Southeast Asia, is much higher than, let's say, in Europe and the United States. This is what I said, and I think it's extremely important that we have a clarity when we are especially quoting the other comments. As a concluding remark, unfortunately, I cannot enjoy Romanian food today, but I would like to just thank you once more for this lovely virtual experience, and stop here, otherwise I would put both Sorina and our great moderator in trouble.
Thank you very much. And Olivier,
big hug, virtual hug to Patrick and others. Thank you.
Olivier, some very quick final remarks?
I would say a few things. One is that I think we are on the right path. We have made a lot of progress in the course of the last years to increase privacy, to increase cybersecurity. On the normative side, we need now to implement it. So there is a lot of work still to do on the implementation side. I'm pretty sure that it will remain high on the political agenda inside the European Union. The other thing is that we have to invest. So we cannot pretend to have human-centric technologies if we do not deploy them ourselves. So very important to have the investment, make sure that there is a good cooperation between the national, European level, between the public and the private sector on investing in these technologies. And the last thing I would say, this type of discussion is very important. So the messages, I hope, will feed through the IGF channels and through the political channels inside the European Union. I think something you might want to discuss inside the SEEDIG is to, in addition to general discussion, have more specific discussion. I mean, what our group on AI and ethics has done, I think could be done here as well. But for that, I would say, like Jovan, it's very important to invite people from other communities, invite AI experts, invite innovators to be able to have also these in-depth discussions.
Thank you very much. On that note, I would like to call for a warm round of applause for our panelists. Apologies for taking you away from lunch. I think we also are on the right track for building trusted, secure global internet for everyone in the region and on a global level as well. Thank you very much, and I'm sure we're going to continue talking about this very important topic during the lunch break as well. Thank you very much.